This is Chris Collinsworth. Be sure to check out the PFF College podcast as our experts provide insight on all the league's top stories. Every game, every player, every play. Download and subscribe on iTunes or your favorite provider.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the PFF podcast. This is a podcast short. I'm your host Sam Monson, and we are going to talk a little bit about Matt Barkley today, a quarterback that I did not think I would be spending any time talking about during the 2016 season. But in each of the past 3 games that he has now started for the Chicago Bears, Matt Barkley has looked pretty good. I'm not ready to crown the guy yet, but I think he's an intriguing quarterback going forward now, and a guy that the Chicago Bears should genuinely be looking at with a view to starting with what he can do going forward. The first point I want to make is his statistics. You want to look at his stats and his completion percentage and his touchdown to interception ratio and all that kind of stuff. It really isn't good right now. He's currently sitting there with a completion percentage of 54.6, a passer rating of 72.8. Nothing about these numbers looks good, but they really don't fairly reflect the performance that he has had. If he has already had 15 passes dropped on him, when you consider the guys he's throwing to, the Chicago Bears have had major problems with their wide receiver core. All the way through the season. They're without Alshon Jeffrey, without Kevin White, Eddie Royal, or without their real top guys. They're basically down to a second/third string receiving core, and these guys have been dropping an insane amount of footballs. In 119 pass attempts, Matt Barkley has had 15 passes dropped. Dak Prescott has nearly thrown the ball 400 times and has had 11 passes dropped. Now, Prescott is at the bottom end of that league, or the bottom end of that league table in terms of drops, but Barkley is by far and away the worst sufferer from drops in terms of a per attempt rate in the entire league. Over 12% of the pass attempts he has had have been dropped by his receivers, and the league average is 5. So it's the difference of about 8% in his completion percentage, which takes him up to being a 62% passer, which suddenly looks great. We're talking about a 10-point swing in his passer rating, and that's just giving him back the yardage that the catch point would have been for these passes, not accounting for yards after the catch, and if any of them would have turned into touchdowns. So it's been a huge thing. It basically skews the numbers. People say that stats don't lie or numbers don't lie, but they really do all the time. And this is a case where the numbers simply don't give you an accurate reflection of what Matt Barkley has achieved. And you can look at it on an individual play level as well. If you go back to this week, the game against Detroit, suddenly Matt Barkley is left having to drive and try and win this game from behind. And he starts hitting receivers, and he connected with Daniel Braverman on a beautiful ball over the middle after he had been put in a hole by his offensive line holding on the play. It was 1st and 20. Matt Barkley completes a first down over the middle. Excellent catch by Braverman, and the offensive line was holding again, so the play gets nullified. I mean, that's a big-time clutch play in a key situation, and it gets taken off the stat sheet completely. We act like it didn't happen because the offensive line held in the play, and it was a ticky-tack call, I think. There were plenty of plays, I think, where you don't call that particular holding call. But anyway, whether it was a legit hold or not, the point is Matt Barkley makes a play, it's not counted in the stat sheet. So I think one thing that does reflect how he's been playing is grading. Part of what we do at PFF is we go back and we watch these guys play by play, and you grade what happened, not whether it counted or not. So Matt Barkley gets credit for making that pass in the clutch situation. We don't take the credit away because the play was nullified. And if you look, he's started the past 3 games for Chicago, and in that 3-week span, he is the 3rd highest graded quarterback in the entire NFL. The only 2 guys with a higher grade than Matt Barkley over that span are Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. And this is an Aaron Rodgers who we have seen the real Aaron Rodgers come back. This is one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league playing at his best. And obviously Tom Brady is the best player or the best quarterback in the NFL this season. So I'm not saying that Barkley has played at that level. He's some way behind those two guys, but he is the third guy on that list. Matt Barkley has played better than any other quarterback in the NFL you can name over that 3-week span, at least if you factor in the PFF grading, if you look at the play-by-play. And I know the statistics won't say that, but that's why I think it's important to dive beyond those numbers. When you look at the receivers that he's throwing to, and it goes beyond simple drops. There are so many ways that inexperienced and just flat out bad receivers can make a quarterback look bad. And I tweeted one of those in an image today. If you go to my Twitter at PFF_Sam, you can find the GIF that I dialed up against the Lions. Simple hitch route. Wide receiver runs 10 yards, turns around, catches the football. And typically on that route, one of the most important things for a wide receiver to do is once you make that break, once you make the stop, you turn and you look for the ball, you have to work your way back towards the quarterback. Because if you don't, the defensive back that's standing at 2 yards behind you when you break, he's coming forward the whole time. He is attacking the ball because he now knows what it is you're running. He sees hitch in front of him. He's attacking that catch point to try and break it up or intercept it. And the way you mitigate that is you work back towards the ball too. So you've stolen a yard of space by breaking off your route and turning around. And if you keep working back towards the quarterback, you can get the ball before the defensive back can. If you don't, if you just make your break, sit down, turn around, and wait for the ball, it's going to get broken up at best, or it's going to be picked off. So there was a play in that game where the receiver did exactly that. He turned on his hitch and just stood there waiting for the ball to arrive. And it turned what should have been a routine first down completion. Matt Barkley put the ball accurately where it needed to go. But because the receiver didn't work his way back towards him, it was broken up and it ended up as an incomplete pass, a pass breakup for the defensive back on a play that really should have been a relatively simple completion. And that's the kind of thing that there's no real number for that. There's no drop pass that you can point to and say, this is a receiver screw up. And there's no even really obvious play in terms of dialing up the tape and seeing, oh, look, this guy run a completely wrong route and it led to Barkley throwing the ball somewhere different. This was just a really subtle mistake and a lack of experience and a lack of quality from his receiver that completely undid a throw by Barkley. And I think that's what you're seeing when you watch him play. Is there's still some bad play in there as well, don't get me wrong. This isn't a perfect quarterback by any means. But by and large, he's been putting the ball where it needs to go. And his receivers, whether it's drops, whether it's subtle mistakes like that, or whether it's just blown assignments, they're not making the plays that he needs them to make. And they're not making the plays that would justify the play that he's had. But I think that's what makes him all the more intriguing, because you're seeing this guy hold up his end of the bargain. And at some point, when you surround him with legitimate NFL caliber weaponry, you're going to get a much better player out of him. And I just think this is such a fascinating development, because Matt Barkley was a guy that I think most people had written off entirely. And the more you look at it, the more unfair that probably was, because coming into this season, his entire career was 83 snaps old. 77 of those came in his rookie season. And this is a fourth-round pick. Fourth-round picks are not ready to play. And if you're throwing those guys in as a rookie, you're going to get bad play. And that's what we saw from him. We saw some extremely ugly play in 2013 when he was with the Eagles. Basically, he played the bulk of 2 solid games. He played against Dallas, played against the Giants, and was absolutely horrendous in those games. I mean, genuinely terrible. You're talking about abysmal PFF grading, the kind of grading back when we were running the old plus and minus system. I mean, he was amongst the lowest graded quarterbacks in the league after just 2 games, of which he only really played 50% of the snaps over those 2 games. So over a season, that would have been plumbing depths that we just haven't seen before. So I think really you're talking about a guy that from that point on, everyone just decided that there's no way you can be that bad and end up turning it around and becoming a good player down the line. It's just there's too far to go, especially in this era of instant quarterback success. Guys coming in and being dominant straight away. Just the mental leap from that position to where you need to go as a quarterback to be viable would just be so huge. I don't think anyone bought it. But, quarterbacks develop. Guys are supposed to sit and learn for a bit and get on the field and get better through doing. But he really hasn't had a chance since then. He's had a bit of stints in the preseason, but that's really about it. And even in preseason, we never really saw any threatening improvement from him. He's played in a lot of preseason since, has always been pretty weak until this year. And this year, the Bears picked him up essentially for nothing. But even this preseason, when he was still back with the Arizona Cardinals, we saw a little something from him. I think he wasn't great in that first game, but then played certainly a very good game against Denver in that final preseason game. And that at least is a departure from the preseasons we've seen before. That game, he completed 20 of 29 passes for 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, a passer rating of 120. That's some pretty good play. The game before, he had a passer rating in the 90s as well. That was pretty good. So I guess if you're working from those, you're thinking, okay, this is at least flashes, and that's in an offense in Arizona, in that Bruce Arians system that doesn't really suit what he does. That high octane, deep down the field, low percentage passing, and he was still able to be successful. But the Bears ended up picking him up when Arizona let him go. Essentially had him for nothing, and there was no reason this guy would be starting games. They had to go through Jay Cutler, Brian Hoyer to get to Matt Barkley, who's only there because of Connor Shaw's injury. But we've seen him be thrust into this starting lineup now. Injuries to both Cutler and Hoyer. The first game he came in, week 7 against the Packers, wasn't great, but it was mid-game in relief. But last 3 games, we've seen Matt Barkley really put together some impressive play. Obviously, you can't rely on that going forward. It's almost unfortunate timing for him, and that there aren't that many games left for him to show that he is a guy going forward. And we've seen quarterbacks put together impressive play in limited stretches before. I mean, Carson Wentz started the season on fire, and suddenly he is struggling badly as a starter. And I'm not sure the Eagles know what they have in him yet, let alone what the Bears have in Matt Barkley. But this is a guy now that becomes very interesting to watch in the final few weeks of the season. If he ends the season with an entire run of impressive play, that becomes an interesting choice for the Bears. I don't think you change all off-season plans, and if you were going to move on from Jay Cutler and draft a new quarterback of the future, I don't think Matt Barkley is going to stop you from doing that, but he suddenly becomes a guy that you could potentially have as your number 2 or even a bridge quarterback, a stopgap guy that could start the 2017 season whilst your rookie learns for half a season or for a season, and actually get some use out of him, get some quality play, and not consider that a complete write-off season. It's just a huge leap from a guy that was essentially a complete non-factor and a player that a lot of people would have been wondering how he was still in the league given the play we've seen from him before. And effectively, he wasn't in the league in 2015. This is a guy that the league had effectively given up on before a couple of second chances were given to him, and he ends up making the most of it. So I think the lesson from all of this is that almost no matter how bad a guy is to begin with, if you knew he was going to be a development project, I'm not going to say it's a mistake to give up on him, because sometimes you just don't have the circumstances to stick with it, but guys can turn that around, and guys can realize potential that they had far later into their NFL careers. These guys all develop at different rates. Some guys are going to hit the ground running like Russell Wilson. Some guys are going to take some years to learn how the play is in the NFL, especially the more college offenses diverge from their NFL counterparts, the more these guys need some time to adjust to the way things are done at this level. Maybe that's what's happened with Matt Barkley, but either way, when you look at how he's playing right now, he's a very interesting quarterback and one that statistics just are not doing justice. So take a look at him the next game. You see, there is a reason to watch the Chicago Bears right now, and it's to see if Matt Barkley can be a quarterback of the future for this team. And that is something I did not think I would be saying at any point during this season. But that's going to do it for our little discussion on Matt Barkley. Hope you've enjoyed that little listen, and keep an eye out for him. We'll be back tomorrow with Tuckman and Mike Renner, and we will preview the games ahead. Hope you've enjoyed this. Take it easy.